Hi, welcome to my video. And so in this video, I'm going to be talking about why I started to notice a lot of people are giving up um, on Windows, and I have not noticed this, but like for example, I'm a very heavy GNU Linux user, right? Like I've been using GNU Linux since what 2000, like right on 2000, like since I was 18 years old. I remember that's when I really took off playing around with Linux. Was on Canopix around 2000, or Debian, I should say. Then after I just jumped onto Canopix because Canopix had a very nice ISO, very lightweight system that was quite lightweight for USB, and also USB booting was very rare back then. So Canopix was one of the best distributions that was based on Debian that actually really booted up quite well on a USB stick. And we didn't really have big USB sticks, so maybe 1 GB was pretty decent back then. So Canopix was around 700 megabytes ISO, sometimes a little bit smaller. There was a really good distribution called Damn Small Linux, which inspired me a lot. When I done my distro spins of Tux Hat Linux in the past, was highly inspired by Damn Small Linux a lot. Thus is why I use a lot of Fluxbox Window Manager as my main desktop environment, because that's what basically Damn Small Linux uses a lot. And I was a very big Fluxbox and OpenBox user. I still really like these window managers quite a lot nowadays. I know a lot of people they talk about using tile window managers, and I used to be really into a lot of tile window managers as well back in the day, especially Awesome Windows Manager. I really used to be highly into that Windows Manager a lot. I feel like 10 years ago, even before that. I always used Awesome for quite a long time. The problem with me with Awesome and what got me to stop using it was, it's because when they do an update, the config of the .lua file, which the whole system is on an LUA framework. So when you did a configuration for your Awesome and they did a major update or whatever, so the config file would break, and I had to rechange everything. And I was just I'm tired of doing this all the time, because I done it a few times, and it's just man, I'm always scared to update the window manager because I had to reconfigure the config file again. And some people probably may like doing that. To me, over time I just didn't really want to do that, and I just you know what, I'm gonna use something different. So I have. I mainly started off with Linux on GNOME desktop environment, and I pretty much always liked GNOME desktop environment. I never really had anything against it. There was a time where GNOME 3, when it first was introduced with GNOME Shell and all that, I was quite interested in it. But yeah, GNOME had its rocky days as well. I didn't really care too much about the new GNOME and GNOME 3. GNOME 3 was pretty rough at the beginning, though it became pretty good towards the end. But GNOME 40 and up, I gotta say, the desktop has improved a lot. And if you look at GNOME today, I quite like GNOME. I think it's a very good desktop environment. Now, there's a lot of people probably that are younger than me that likes to tinker around the system and configure it and customize it, and which is cool, because I have done that a lot when I was younger. And it's not the fact that I'm getting older that I'm just don't really want to do that stuff anymore. It's just, it could be part of that, or it just could be I have done it so many times over the years that nowadays I I just want a good desktop, that looks, not like Windows or Mac OS, but has a very similar feel of the previous systems that I grew up using. Because I use a lot of Windows, because I grew up with Windows most of my life. When I was young, like in the early days, like especially in the 90s, 80s, 90s, I used Windows a lot, DOS, which I never really care for DOS too much. When I discovered GNU, I was just like, man, this is so much better than DOS. Like I never went back to DOS ever since. Like I just want to be in a Unix like command line. I just prefer it better. It makes a lot. To me, a Unix command line makes more sense than DOS, but that's a personal opinion. Also, I notice a lot of people are switching over to Windows to Linux. Linux has improved a lot over the years, and gaming on Linux is really good. That's all to do with Valve. Valve is really awesome because they really support Linux quite a lot, and yeah, that makes me really happy. Also, I think Linux is getting more known and it's getting more popular, and it's actually improving a lot. Like over the years, like I have seen Linux grown to be something really great. Now, for many years off and on would just completely ditch Windows. I would always go back to it, go and then ditch it, go back to it, go ditch it. I always seemed to had some dependency on Windows, and I couldn't really let it go for certain games and certain programs. Like there was games like Destiny 2 that I used to play back in the day, but I do actually have it on a console as well. So I mean, I could always just play it on the console. That still, they don't want to support the anti-cheat for Linux, so therefore you can't really play Destiny 2. But Destiny 2 is on a rocky road right now anyways, and I hadn't been playing it for many years anyways. Now, there's other games like, let's say Lost Ark. If you have a big wallet and you're willing to ditch a lot of money, I mean, then go ahead and play Lost Ark anyways. But also, it's another game that they don't want to support the anti-cheat to run on Linux as well, so you won't be able to play Lost Ark on Linux. And to be honest, Lost Ark is a very pay-to-win game. I would recommend people not to play it anyways, but it is a good game, don't get me wrong. Like, I like Lost Ark. I think it's a great game. I just think it's really, really just not managed properly, and I think it's very, very expensive to play. There's games that I love playing as well as Final Fantasy XIV, which is probably my favorite game in the world, and it works really good on Linux. I run it on my RTX 4060 GPU, and I run it on max settings, and the game just runs solid, like no issues. Runs way over 60 frames per second, and yeah, the game works really well on Linux and on Arch Linux on top of that. Pretty much a lot of the games I play runs on Linux quite well. Like Monster Hunter games work really good on Linux. Well, I don't know, like Dark Soul games. If you like playing Dark Souls, it runs good on Linux. You like playing Passive Exile, it runs good on Linux. If you guys still are into Diablo games, Diablo 4 works pretty good on Linux. Even if you run it on the Battle.net client, but it runs really, really, really good on the Steam version of Diablo 4. But Diablo 4 is, I got some mixed feelings with that game as well. That's personal, mixed feelings. I know there's a lot of people like to use KDE because it's a good system to customize a lot. I used to use KDE once in a while, but I never really got into KDE. I don't know why. It's something about the system. To me, it just feels like it's too much stuff on it. I like GNOME because it's more basic. I like more of a basic system. No, like KDE, you could probably get trimmed down version of it, but I think they got a lot of applications on KDE that most people don't even use. So I think it's kind of bloated with stuff that you don't really need. And I think GNOME is more like a nice blank slate kind of, so to speak, especially on Arch Linux. Like, it's very lightweight because it basically just installs GNOME and then no software. You just put what you want and that's it. And to be honest, like, I gotta say, GNOME is really good. A lot of people probably say, well, you know, GNOME and using desktop environments take up a lot of resources of your memory. Well, like, sorry to say, if you can't spare 3 gigabytes of resource to run a desktop environment, then I don't know, I would probably reconsider your computer of choice, because even Windows running Mac OS or any other system, it's got to require about 3 to 4 gigabytes of resource. Yes, window managers can be lightweight, though the more you add to the window manager, the more bloated it gets. You want it, like, you know, like, let's say you want to put polybar and add some other cool features to your, you know, very bare bone minimalistic window manager. You can actually quite bloat a window manager system quite a lot. And also, I notice sometimes when you run a window manager, you could actually make it run a lot harder on your computer than it will with just using a regular desktop environment. One thing I like about GNOME Shell is that it's integrated. It's all part of the whole shell itself. And basically, it just has its software. And I think, personally, I just like GNOME because it's very, it's just very, I don't know, I just like it. I like the workflow of it. Like, I just got really, really, especially with the new, like, you know, like, workspace switcher. I really think that's the greatest idea. I really like that feature a lot in GNOME 45, and I gotta say, like, I'm quite impressed with that a lot. The only, like, I mean, I'm not gonna say, like, there's nothing perfect in this world, right? And humans are not perfect at all either. That's a good example why things are not perfect. They tend to take features out, like the system tray. Now, I know some people probably don't really care for a system tray, which is fine. I really like using the system tray, but or maybe I just like having it there. I think that it's useful to have a system tray, but some people probably don't even care or even, you know, notice it. I'm glad that we can still add the system tray back with extensions on GNOME. But yeah, I think that system tray should never be removed from GNOME. Also, desktop icons on the desktop, I think that should never been removed as well. Though there's an extension that you can get to put them back on. Just like the dock, I like it visible, and it's only visible in activity menus by default. Of if, like, you go to activity menu like this, this is the only time you'll see the dock, and the dock is a lot bigger than this if you use the default dock. But with extension dash to dock, you can basically you know, customize your GNOME dock and actually even make it visible as well, which, as you can see right here, it's visible on the desktop. And one thing I like about dash to dock, it adds, like, you plug in like a drive, it'll show like your drive that's mounted. It shows like devices that you have mounted already, and also it shows us the trash can on there, and you have your little show all app menu, which is really useful to have, and you can just pin the applications that you use the most onto your dock, which I can consider very useful, very Mac OS like. But I actually do use a Mac system as well. I do have a Mac computer, and I do use Mac OS occasionally, not often, but I sometimes have to use it for Mac devices. So I do use iPhone, and I do use an Apple Watch, so I use some Apple features. And I know people probably like, oh, why would you use Apple? Apple's this and that. Android's better, blah, blah. I don't want to argue with this at all. But I also have an Android phone. Right here. It's hard to show. I I have choices. I like them both, but personally, I consider I like Apple better. Just because I think their devices work a lot better compared to most Android phones that I buy, because I can't afford like the flagship Android phones. And to be honest, a flagship Android phone costs a lot more than an iPhone. So people think iPhones are expensive. If you're buying like the best like Samsung model, you're gonna be paying quite a lot of money for it, especially in Canada. A lot more than when you pay for an iPhone. And yes, you can get other kind of models, but me, like if I'm gonna get Android, I really like Samsung. I'm a Samsung person. I think they make good quality products, and I think a lot of cheaper Android phones are basically that cheap. And I find iPhones are actually pretty good quality, and actually to have really nice displays on it. I really like the iPhone display. It's very sharp, very bright, very crisp, and I find that the system on an iPhone works really good, and it's very simplistic. I like very keep it simple devices. I know like people like Android, they can customize it and do all kinds of stuff with it. Like I used to do a lot of that before in the past as well, which is really fun. But you know, when you get older, not everybody, probably people still always will be tinker. I still tinker around with systems, but I just don't really have the time to really write, window managers, play around with different window managers, configure it, theme it. And I still do occasionally, like once in a while, I'll still go back and do like write a desktop and stuff. And I have done it a few years ago or last year or this year even. So I still do it. I mean, it's not like I completely stopped doing it. It's just that I think that there's a lot of other things you can do with Linux and just write in your desktop. There's a lot of things you can learn about Linux than just write in your desktop. But though it's fun to play around with your desktop, that's what makes Linux really great. Is that it's very highly customizable, and that's cool. But there's a lot of things you can learn on Linux as well. So I learn other things on Linux because I already know how to write a desktop environment, and I just don't consider it really useful for me nowadays. Is it bad to do it? No. If you have fun playing around with that, go all crazy with it. All to it, man. Have fun with that. I think it's cool. I used to do it a lot. I used to be a hardcore racer. And yeah, it's fun. It's just it's very time consuming. If you have the time to do it, go for it. Me, I don't really have the time, especially nowadays. Working 40 plus hours, plus doing YouTube content and doing playing games on the side, and yeah, I don't really have much time for anything really. If I really am off, and I gotta really choose my time. Like I don't even have a time for having a girlfriend. If I had a girlfriend, I would have to sacrifice a lot of things I love to do with computers and things I do in my spare time for her. And that's probably why I stay single, because I kind of like my lifestyle the way it is now. Now, do I want to stay single forever? No. But I haven't found that right lady. Just haven't found her yet. So I just wait. I'm patient. God has plans for me, and if He wants me, with a nice lady, then He'll find me a nice lady. But do I feel like lost or without one? No, I actually don't. I actually can live life alone and still be happy. I don't really depend on people. I have Jesus, and that's all I really need in my life. And pretty much I'm pretty good. I'm pretty solid with myself, I love who I am, and I love Jesus, and I follow Jesus, and I'm never alone anyways. And to be honest, I'm very independent, and that's good. Anyways, off of that topic, so yeah, I just I know this rant probably means nothing, but I just want to basically talk about, like, I see Linux getting really really good, and people are just completely ditching Windows and have no use for it. And the more like Windows integrating with all that AI stuff, I can see a lot of people just go away from Windows altogether, because I know I'm not the only one that actually don't really care for all this AI stuff. And I mean, the younger generation probably care for it more because it's more their kind of style, I guess. But for me, I grew up without AI stuff, and I mean, like, in an operating system for one thing. And maybe I'm just old school, but I really don't really care for that all that stuff. I think it's just extra bloat on your system that you don't really need. You don't need it. You don't need AI to think for you. You can think for yourself. That's the whole point of using a computer, is you're the operator. I don't want something to control my computer. I want to have full control of my computer. That's another reason why I use Linux, because you have full control over your system compared to using Windows and Mac OS. At least you have more control over it because you have more freedom with your system. Anyways, yeah. So I never really cared for Windows for a long time, to be honest. But I always had dependency on it because certain things I like to, like games and certain software that only ran on Windows, would kept me using Windows, or was my excuse to still use Windows, because it's probably just bad habits, to be honest. And yeah, I finally ditched Windows for a long while, and I just use Arch Linux. I could use different distributions on different computers, but I think personally I like Arch Linux, so I just put Arch Linux on all my computers, because I think that, to me, is a great system and it works well for me. And I like using GNU, and I know people consider that's not a real Arch Linux user, and I could care less what people think about if I'm real or not. I know myself. I know Arch Linux. I use Arch Linux for a long time, probably more than most people that watches my videos. So it's not a contest. It's not something to brag about. It's just, I know what a real Arch Linux user is. It's a person that uses Arch Linux in general. It doesn't matter what desktop environment you use, because it's just a desktop environment. Like, if you really want to be a true Arch Linux user, just stick it in the command line, because that's basically what it is. Anyways, guys, have a good one. Thanks for the watch. I appreciate all the feedback and comments. It's really good. My channel feels quite alive, and that's great. I'm always doing my best to respond back as best as I can, and I usually do respond back. I'm not a person like that does YouTube content and just ignore people. No, I talk to everybody because I love Linux, and I love to talk to people because I'm a friendly person like that. Anyways, guys, have a good one. I appreciate everything, and much love. And if I don't make another video before Christmas, Merry Christmas, everybody. And yeah, have a good one, guys. Cheers.